Hey, what's going on, y'all? Back with another one, back with another one, back with another one. We're going to talk about individualism, right? Individualism part one, we was just explaining the basis of pretty much the same, you know, context. But that's just how we see it right now. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Okay. Turn it up a little bit. Okay, individualism. Yes, it's a moral, political, or social outlook, but the stresses human independence and the importance of individual self reliance and liberty. It opposes most external interference with an individual choices, whether by society, the state, or any other group, institution, collectivism, or statism. And it also opposes to the view that a tradition, religion, or any other form of external moral standard should be used to limit individuals' choice of actions, but ethical individualism, then the position that the individual conscience of reason is the only moral rule. There is no objective authority or standard which is beyond to take into account, but it can apply to morality of the Scottish school of common sense of the late 18th century, but the autonomous morality of Immanuel Kant, and even ancient Greek and hedonism and Eudemianism, like I recently talked about last year. The two parts I considered on the political world systems, how happiness is a construct of their happiness, what they call Eudemianism. That's what they prefer it as. That's it. Talks about egoism. We talked about it in part one, the philosophy basics, and we're pretty much it. Yes, a habit of principle, long independent of self reliant. That's what individualism is. And it's pretty much, self explanatory and things like that. The definition and symptoms, which it pretty much what you see is what you get. Hold on for a minute. Oh, let's see here. Individualism is also take of yourself. It is a belief and practice, but the person is unique, self-reliant, and a belief. Individualism also implies that you and believe that the government should butt out of your individual affairs. That's what individualism is. Some people still have and they preach it. That's what they think, but realistically, you can't even practical. Not everybody's going to be individualist, but individualism is preached in the modern day social network, what they would call social media today, and all things like that. The reason I'm covering this part, that's how people's mindset believes, but in reality, it's the opposite. People don't show it. It ain't about that. Yeah, individualism works in certain settings, but not that it doesn't work in religion. It's a great dream and great wish, but it doesn't work. It's kind of like utilitarianism a little bit. Only elite people would think like that. Yeah, I see them doing it. But as a group, no. A group of individuals does not exist. It's non existent. It always have and never will be. Each individual, that's just a category that people put themselves in. So it's like pretty much stale at this point. They talk about the affairs and things like that. Let's look at the history of individualism. Like, got it here, and then I'm just gonna drop this down. You understand the philosophy basics. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The affairs, the etymology, English language. The word individualism is first introduced in the utopian socialists. Yeah, it has a socialistic views because they think like individualists. There's really not such thing as socialists. I mean, yeah, most socialists think like individualists. How can they care about people when they think like individualists? That's why it don't work. That's why socialism doesn't exist, and that's why communism exists. Some people say it exists in certain countries, but 95% of them are really individualists. It only works in countries like what they would say like Cuba, other places. Cuba's only successful individually, and they understand they're gonna have free healthcare. So it's pretty much like their society is based off what you see is what you get. And some people say Cuba's bad. Technically, it's not bad. If you like that type of individualistic mindsets, yeah, that's why most of them preach socialism, communism as a group. In practice, people do that, but 9 out of 10 they care about themselves half of the time. That's usually where it does. That boils down to it. Now, America is individualist during, I would say, capitalist, but even though it's a fascistic culture because they love corporations way more than individuals themselves. That's the problem with the world. They have a herd mentality. That's why individualism is kind of shaky and go either way, no matter which political way you stray from. But it is what it is. And they say individualism in society holds that the person take a part of the society's attempts to learn and discover what is his or her own interest are on the personal basics. I mean bases. But that's basically what it is. That's you're on that type of tip. It's different levels of individualism. Anybody can be an individualist. And usually it works, and then most of the time it don't work. That's just usually where it is. So it's pretty much the same as you can hear. So yeah. Um I'm gonna step away real quick. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I'm gonna step away real quick. I'll be right back. So individualism is basically you have different people and concepts that people understand what's going on. When you're a true individualist, you understand that you're responsible for your own actions. But normally people just get caught up in not being individuals. They just like to be communitarianism. I talk about this, I think, was it 2 years ago? I believe I talked about it in some time. Communitarianism and social contracts is basically the opposite of individualism. And I was going to talk about these topics real soon or later. And I'm just like saying, like, people get caught up on the wrong stuff and act like this is not something that you see all the time. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand why people just get caught up on that. Let's look at my political world system. Let's see what I did this. I think I did this like 2 years ago. Communitarianism. I talked about equality. I did part one. If you watch part one, it was 10 months ago. And it's going to be probably, yeah, 10 months ago of 2 years ago. Or is it last year? I think it was like a year, or was it last year? Fascism or whatever. Communitarianism 10 months ago. I think it was last year. I'm not sure. I think it was last year. Communitarianism. Yeah, yeah, it was last year. It was like 10 months ago. I talked about communitarianism. Yeah, that was last year of 2022. My fault. And then part two, yeah, was last year. And then I talked about totalitarianism. Yeah, that's in the spring. It'll be a year in the spring. So I talked about these in the spring. So communitarianism, I was going to talk about it 2 years ago and got it. And it's a 3 hour thing. Then it turned into an hour on the part two. And it's also under Political World Systems playlist. You can watch that. And contractitarianism was another one. That's a big one. similar to that. And then we have the social contractualism. That's part one. Contractual and part two didn't do so hot, but it did decent. Y'all can watch both of those. And I brought up social contracts. So again, individualists to that comparison of the two, I've been talking about it for the whole night long. But that's the thing about the political structure. So it ain't really much. And I'm just saying, like, you get what you pay for. Then I talk about a lot of stuff, but but individualism is just in everything. We did part one. Y'all saw that. That's pretty good. But it's like we're gonna get into individualist part two. But part two, we're gonna touch on the basics. Why individualists it's not really that successful in the long run. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna type in. I'm gonna see what's what here, and pretty much I'm just like seeing what's going on. But people get caught up on this word and get hung up and act like you can be individuals. Yeah, in certain degrees, but can it be a system? No, it can't. Don't work that way. Some people say, does it bring happiness and all that stuff? We're gonna go in cultures. We see people are individualistic. Yes, America can be it, but it doesn't bring happiness and things like that. We're gonna talk about the ills, the cons of individualistic behavior. It's nothing wrong being individual, but being individualistic cultures, can it run the system? No, it cannot run the country. It never will. That's why you have to have balance of each. Culture is one facet can have influence on how people think and behave. One factor that cross-cultural psychologists is often study involves in the difference in the similarities in between individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures. That's what we talked about. Individualistic cultures, like we talk about certain systems like capitalism, fashion, all that stuff with one individual controlling the whole people, right? That works in some degree as long as you have leadership. You have that balance of people. Now, when you have a collectivist mindset, you're talking about communitarianism, you're talking about contractualism deals with people, but no leadership. Most people, quiet as kept, most Americans prefer to be communitarians. You see it in America, you see it in Canada. That's the average person. The average moderate person is basically a communitarian. The average person that's in politics and want to rule the world and control mass people, that's a group of individuals. It is kind of like what you see now. Yes, you have individualistic culture in different systems, but they also have a leader that's an individualistic mindset. His role game to build his country or culture and things like that. That's why you got to separate the two. And this is pretty good. This is very well .com and like it says, but we're gonna I'm gonna share the screen. Hold on for a minute. I'm gonna share the screen. I'm gonna move right quick and let's get it up in here. Yeah, I know people get caught up. Let's see. I know share screen can be a hassle. Okay, we read this part in collectivist cultures, but individualistic cultures are often the stress that needs of the individual over the needs of the group. So that's the difference. As a whole, in this type of culture, people are seen as independent and autonomous. Social behavior tends to be social behavior tends to be dictated by the attitudes and the preference of individuals, certain individuals like leaders and things like that. Handful of the elites, right? That runs the world. That's really realistic. It is an individualistic culture, but when you have rulership like that, that's always been the dawn of mankind. Collectivist people, they work as a group. That's like a utilitarian concepts. They have like a little bit dabble of the two. Only difference is utilitarianism deals with happiness of the greatest number, but sometimes communitarians deal with collective of people. They work as a group setting. Cultures in North America and Western Europe tend to be individualistic, which is true. They're capitalists. Most capitalists are individualistic. Socials, all that is individualistic. Yeah. Traits of individualistic cultures. The traits they say. They say self-sufficiency does exist in this country, what they will say North America. Self self-sufficiency, uniqueness, a- anatomy, and independence. That's what they preach. Certain countries do have that. Switzerland has it, but America sometimes can be both. It can be communitarian one minute and it can be individualistic the next in certain states. But that's a whole nother topic. Individualistic culture traits. Chances you have probably heard that the terms individualistic and collectivist cultures before, often in context of nothing behavior and attitude difference between the two types of societies. So, what exactly makes individualistic cultures different from collectivist ones? A few common characteristics of individualistic cultures include being a dependent upon others is often considered shameful or embarrassing. That's what most people think. Independence is highly valued. Individual rights take center stage. People often place a greater emphasis on standing out and being unique. Nine out of 10, it works in certain settings, but reality, that's not how the world works. Most people would rather be collectivists every now and then, but you do have individualistic rivals that mix with a combination of things. But this is a kind of a reach. They should add something else different. People tend to be self-reliant. It's a small minority true right there. This is false, but this is partially true. But this one is false. That's what they try to say. Nobody wants to be unique. But in these three right here, yeah, but in the wrong way. They don't preach that. That's changed now. The rights of individuals tend to take higher higher prudence. Yeah, higher prudence. It don't exist that no more. So, the only three I told you, this right here, everybody wants to be this three right here. That works. But the other three, not so much. It's non existent nowadays. Everybody wants to be collectivist. That's what's wrong with people. But it doesn't work either. Individualistic cultures don't work either. It depends on what setting, what leadership you have. Some work and some don't. Just like collectivists, some do, some don't. I mentioned Castro earlier. You know, a few countries that are considered individualistic cultures include the United States, Germany, Ireland, South Africa, and Australia. See, Esau done conquered these lands. He conquered the United States, Germany, Ireland, South Africa, and Australia, which is fact. Which is fact. So it's pretty much it. Yeah. Individual, individualistic versus collectivist cultures. Individualist cultures are frequently compared and contrast with more collectivist cultures, where collectivism stresses the importance of the group and social cooperation, not corporation, but cooperation, social cooperation. Individualism prizes things such as autonomy, independence, self sufficiency, and uniqueness. That's all it preaches. Once upon a time, there was uniqueness. It don't exist nowadays because everybody wants to be collectivists and communitarians right now. Deep down, they're not built like that. You have to be a certain individual to be built like that. That's why individualistic cultures work with certain individuals, not for everybody. Because most people naturally is communitarian. I hate to say it. If you build a society and y'all just go Roman anarchy, that's basically what it is. Sufficiency, yeah, half of the world is self-sufficient. This still works and thrives, but the uniqueness that's gone. Most individuals ain't got no uniqueness. It's only a handful nowadays. Independence and others like self-sufficient and autonomy, yeah, it works. Where people in collectivist cultures might more likely turn to family and friends. That's true in certain cultures like the Mexicans and everybody else, certain groups and Asian cultures. You already see it. That's what's in the country now. But 9 to 10, everybody wants to be individualistic. Even their culture has changed to be individualistic. If you're in capitalism, you're going to be an individualistic person. That's the whole point of fictional world of Rome, aka America. That's pretty much it. But for support during difficult times, those living in the individualistic cultures are more likely to go it alone. That's what they're doing here now. Individualistic cultures stress that people should be able to solve problems or accomplish goals on their own without having to rely on assistance from others. People often expect to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We heard this term before. Sound like an old Republican talking point, or should I say political babble talking point at that. Under setbacks, this tendency to focus on the personal identity and autonomy. Autonomy is a pervasive part of a culture. Yeah, it's very pervasive. It's part of the culture that can also have profound influence on how society functions. For example, workers in a individualist culture are more likely to value their own well-being over the good of the group. Good of the group. You hear that? That's a utilitarian concept. It's a different type of utilitarian concept right there. They just use for the group. That's what they pushed. So you're better than the group. Excuse me. When they say of the group, okay, it's a little utilitarian concept right there. They try to use, but you know how it is. It goes both sides every now and then. Contrast this with a collective culture where people might sacrifice their own comfort for the greater good of everyone else. Such difference can influence nearly every aspect of the behavior, ranging from the career, career a person chooses, but the products they buy, that the social issues that they care about. Approaches to healthcare, for example, and influenced by these tendencies, individualist cultures stress the importance of each person of healthcare, right? Take care of his or herself without depending on others for assistance. But those in the collectivist cultures may instead stress the sharing the sharing of the burden of the care with the group as a whole. That's a collectivist mindset. 95% of the time, most people are individualistic. That's America. That's how they think. That's why we don't have free healthcare, because they too individualistic, and that usually don't work half the time. That's how people operate. They've always operated as individualists. That's what this Western world operates. That's their whole mantra. But now it's fading away to collectivism. They don't like it. You see, they got to share their little shit. That's the whole culture. Effects on behavior. But the effect of culture has individual behavior, but is a major topic interest in the field of cross cultural psychology. But cross cultural psychologists studied how different the cultural factors influence of individual behavior, but they often focus on things that are universal among different cultures of the world, but as well difference among societies. Our interest in phenomenon that cross-cultural psychologists have observed how from the individualist cultures describe themselves, but compared to how collectivist cultures describe themselves. But people from individualist societies have self concepts that are more focused on independence, but rather than independence as a result. But they tend to describe themselves in the terms of their unique personal characteristics and traits. A person from individualistic culture would say, "I am a analytical, sarcastic and athletic." This would be contrast with self descriptions from people living in collectivist society who be more likely to say something like, "I am a good husband and a loyal friend." That before. We heard that before. We heard that before. And a person, individualistic culture might say, "I am analytical, sarcastic, and athletic," but this can be contrast with the self description people live in. He said, "Husband and loyal friend." Oh, okay. I just read that. Okay. Just how much self description vary depending on upon culture. Research conducted by Ma and Skoneman found that the while of 60% of Kenyans, a collectivist culture, describe themselves in terms of their role with groups, with 48% of Americans and individualist culture use personal characteristics to describe themselves. like we do every day. Yeah, it's basically, it's just I just want to talk about the cultures and behavior, and yeah, and then these are the behaviors. Right? So mainly, you just have these cultures come in into play, very individualistic and things like that nature. So it's pretty much like you're in it and you understand, right? So I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute, but yeah, like it says, the individualistic cultures. I'm gonna put this in. Where we're gonna have it in. Okay. I may do a part 3 and we're gonna discuss this part right here. And that's pretty much all I got, but I'm just gonna stop it right now. But yeah, be on the lookout for part 3 real soon. We're gonna stay on this topic, individualists, and we're gonna cover the main things that I want to cover is why they're like that. Why is individualistic cultures exist in the Western world? It's always have been, and then I'll do a piece on it. I'm just trying to get some like thing done. But yeah, but be lookout on part 3. Like I said, I come back with another one. Check this out on the political systems. And yes, individualism part 2 is here and we're on it. Signing off. Until next time, I'm going to say, I am out and shalom.